This is Ezron. Welcome to my Bastion. Today, Plarium announced the next round of balance changes, otherwise known as buffs and nerfs, for a set of champions we've been waiting for some time. Most notably among them was Pixie, who they've been saying they were going to buff for a while. What Plarium didn't say is when they are going to make these changes live. Now, it would not surprise me if these went live Thursday with the new Bannerlord's Champion fusion. But that's only inference on my part. Like, I'm not a member of the content creator program, and I don't believe that they've actually published this. I'm going to give my thoughts on these buffs and nerfs right now. I think one difference is I'm only going to talk about champions that I have, so I have direct experience with, and I think that gives me a little bit more insight on some of the buffs and nerfs than someone I've never gotten to play with at all. So let's get right into the champions. So we're going to start with who might be everyone's favorite champion to hate, and that's Tila Gourmet. Now, I did do a video on her a couple months ago in that she got me through the first rotation of Doom Tower with Sorath the Frost Spider when I had no other hit point burn champions on my account. So I think I have a little bit of insight in how she works versus most people just put her directly in the vault. Let's pull up the changes and we'll see what I think about them. So here is the list of changes that are germane to Tila. Now, starting with, base speed increased to 98 when ascended. I think that's, 6 speed is 6 speed. There's nothing to complain about there. That is, a useful improvement. Now, moving on to Hexdrinker Scimitar. Here we go. And now, so the change added a 50% chance of stealing a second buff to the A1. Now, her A1 is actually pretty good, and stealing buffs is a relatively rare skill among champions. So adding a 50% chance to steal a second one, it's an improvement. Now, how much we'll use it and how useful it is not really clear to me. I will say I use her right now only in Orc Faction Wars, so there are some stages like with Rosh cards that put up unkillable where she actually helps a lot in clearing the waves. But overall, I'd say this is kind of a situational improvement, and you wouldn't really use it in any place you wouldn't use Tila already. So let's move on to Pyre Strike. So I think the big news with Pyre Strike is that the cooldown is decreased from 4 turns to 3 turns. So that is nice, and with placing a 2-turn hit point burn, that's way easier to keep it up all the time. Also, removing the need to have a critical hit to put the continuous heal buff on all allies, it's an improvement. The problem I have here is that it's still a single target hit point burn, so you have people like Akoth the Seared who are available for free out of normal Doom Tower that blow Tila away when it comes to being a hit point burn champion. I can't see that you would use her anywhere after the buff you wouldn't already use her. I think people's real desire would be that she gets an AoE hit point burn so you can use her in Spider, or you do something a little bit more so she's viable in Doom Tower. So far with Tila, my analysis is, yes, it's a buff, but this is the smallest change they could have made to say that there was an improvement. And I don't think the net effect of this is going to be Tila getting any more use. I'll try her out after the changes go live, and we'll see, if my initial impression is what I thought would happen. But overall, I'll say I'm not impressed. So give me a second, and I will move on to the next champion. Next up on the buff list is Pixie. Now, she was the Christmas Fusion champion in 2020 and was sort of showed up as being underwhelming and never really got a lot of playtime or fanfare. And Plarium responded to this by, we've been known for quite some time that they're planning on buffing her, and now is apparently the time that we're going to get it. I think the main criticism of her kit is, her A1 30% chance of placing a Veil. Her A2 buffs and debuffs, but isn't really all that. Now here's where we get into the the interesting parts. Attacks 5 times at random. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a freeze unless you happen to hit someone twice and they get a 100% chance. This is not so awesome because you can't build a good battle plan around it. Compare this to, say, Luria, who is a straight-out AoE attack with a 75% chance of placing a freeze when booked. And this just seems underwhelming compared to an epic. And the fact that you can't rely on what's going on makes her just very difficult to use. Combine that with the passive, low percentage chances for the effect to happen, as well as just your inability to be sure what Pixie's going to do. And this is interesting, like the second part of her passive has a 25% chance of filling the champion's turn meter when they receive a freeze. It just is underwhelming compared to, say, Dark Elhain, who was a login champion, that when someone freezes her, she gets to go take a turn. And that's why I think that Pixie is, just not really liked or supported by the community, is because her kit is unreliable and she requires lots and lots of books. And legendary books are very difficult to come by in order to have her operate at full effectiveness. So let's go look at the buff list. Start with Mistress of Glamours. Now, instead of having a 30% chance of placing a veil on a random ally, it's a 30% chance of placing a perfect veil on the ally with the lowest hit points. I mean, yes, it's an improvement, but I can't say it really matters that much. Compare this to Duchess, who just puts a veil on everyone but herself, or many other veil champions. It's not so awesome. I would think if we instead had this as, a 60% chance of placing a veil, bookable to like 80 or 90%, then you would have what people would expect in terms of this is a legendary champion that befits using books. And then moving on to her passive, Frostweaver. This is actually a significant improvement. Rather than a 20% chance of stealing the freeze, you have a 50% chance of stealing a freeze. That is huge. So bookable to 75. That's big. And then, from a 25% chance to a 35% chance of filling the turn meter. Bookable to 60. That's a significant improvement. And then the real important part is as it is in the game, there's a 35% chance of removing the freeze debuffs at the start of her turn. It becomes a 100% chance. It removes off the bat. So I think this is a significant improvement, and you might see Pixie getting some play in arena defense or arena offense against Torment teams. And I think that's really where her niche might end up being. This whole, I can steal a freeze debuff, increase my own turn meter, and then get rid of it at the start of my turn and still take an action, which, if it works the way that we expect, might be a pretty significant improvement in terms of we have someone who's good for the arena in the somewhat niche area of fighting Torment teams, but that's kind of a big deal because, I don't have a Torment, and that's an arena or 3v3 arena team that I avoid just because he's so difficult to deal with. You can't have anyone that buffs or increases turn meter, which is most of your good arena champions, or you run the risk of freezing yourself. So I'm excited about the Pixie buffs, and I intend on building her after the buff happens, potentially as part of the champion training tournaments for the next fusion, just to see if I can get some mileage out of her in my arena or 3v3 arena. I think what they did to Pixie is solid. It's not amazing, but it's solid, and that might result in additional playtime. So you blow up the next champion. The next champion on the balancing list I have is Crypt King Grawl. I will say I did not use him at all on my account until Spider 21 to 25 came out. And the important thing about the harder levels of Spider is that they got the new passive that keeps turn meter reduction from acting at full efficiency. So you no longer can have a cold hearts completely reduce the turn meter of the Spider. And so I changed my way of dealing with it to rely rather heavily on elemental unity. And it's interesting is I get someone else to place the hit point burn, and then Crypt King Growl places the freeze on all of the Spiderlings. And this is a really impactful and effective ability because it cannot be existed. So I run him at level 50 in relatively bad gear just for this unresistible effect. Anything else he does is gravy, and I don't really rely on him to do anything other than keep my team from taking damage from the Spiderlings. So let's look at the changes here and see what they're going to do. We get Brutalness Bane. They added a second effect, in that we have a 100% chance to decrease attack if the target is under a hit point burn or a freeze. Now I think this makes Crypt King Growl more useful on traditional clan boss teams because you have a 100% effective decrease attack. You know, accuracy aside, you need to make sure you hit the accuracy threshold, so there always will be a 3% chance of getting resisted. But I would call this a significant improvement if you're going to use Crypt King Growl on either a clan boss or other dungeon bosses. Like, this is a nice improvement. And then let's look at his next ability, which I think is really where the money is for Crypt King, and that's with Death Fires. You know, so currently it's 3 times at random, and you have a 50% chance of placing a hit point burn. And this is why you can't rely on him in Spider, because there's 10 Spiderlings plus the Mama Spider, so there's 11 people total, and he'll hit 3 of them with a 50% chance, bookable to 75, of placing a hit point burn. So increased damage multiplier, so it should hit harder and attacks all enemies, and increasing the base chance to 75% of placing a hit point burn, so 100% after booked. Like, this is a huge change and improvement. And I think this enables Crypt King Growl to be your primary hit point burn champion for the upper levels of Spider. Like, I'm really excited about this change. I think this will take Crypt King from your vault to getting playtime on your account. And this is the first of what I would call like the buffs that I really think are effective and are helpful in taking a champion from the vault and getting them playtime. Pixie was so and maybe has made her go from vault champion to situational usefulness. Tila, I think, will still be a vault champion, but now Crypt King Growl, I think, because they made his hit point burn AoE and 100% chance of landing, he has now joined the big leagues of champions, and I think has a place in the game. And this is a huge improvement, and good on Plarium for doing it. I plan on at least trying and using him more once the buff gets made live. And I'll follow this video up with one for Crypt King, just so we can see if my predictions were as expected. So I'm going to move on a second, and we'll pull up the champion now who got a nerf as part of champion balancing. And here we are with Eurogrim, the only champion who is getting a nerf as part of this round of champion balancing. So we're looking at him in my vault because I'm in the middle of building him. I got Eurogrim like 2 weeks ago. I've got him 6-starred, fully ascended at level 46. And just so you have an idea of where he is, on my account, he's got pretty good gear. He's reasonably fast, so that's 229 speed. He's got almost 260 accuracy, 220 resists, And he's not all the way geared up, but for my account, this is good gear. And I mention this because I want to show you what Eurogrim can do given this level of gearing. And I'm going to let it out early. I understand why they nerfed him. I'm not thrilled about it, but I sort of understand why. So let's look at what they did do. Skull Staff has A1. They changed from attacks one enemy 3 times to attacks one enemy 2 times. And so we go from someone who can potentially place 3 5% poisons for 2 turns to someone who can potentially place 2 5% poisons for 2 turns. Now, I will note at this point, this is still better than Steel Skull by about 10%. So this A1 is not actually bad. It's quite insane right now, placing potentially 3 poisons. So moving on to placing 2 makes it still good, but just not crazy. And then moving on to Bizarre Vapors. Here's where really the big nerf happened. So right now, it's a 5-turn cooldown, bookable to 3 turns. I booked him twice. With the ability to place 3 5% poisons and 2 15% continuous heals, moving that to a 6-turn cooldown, so 4 turns after books, to place only 2 poisons and 1 continuous heal. Now this is a significant reduction in his ability to place both poisons and heals. And I'm going to go show in a second what Eurogrim is capable of. I think these 2 nerfs together are too much. Personally, I think only the Bizarre Vapors nerf should happen. I want to see him keep the A1 being a 3-hit, which makes him much more viable for Fire Knight. Like right now, Eurogrim is ridiculous in Dragon and Ice Golem. And I think if you kept the A1 at a 3-hit, he would still be usable in Ice Golem. In Fire Knight. I'm no longer sure he will be. So let's move over to a Dragon run, and I'll show you why I think he was nerfed and why I understand the nerf. At this point, I think it's just a little bit strong, but you can kind of see why it happened. So give me a second and let me start a Dragon run. And here we are in the Dragon's Lair. You know, there's currently a super raid on Dragon available, which really gives you the ability to burn a lot of energy in Dragon, and hopefully therefore, you know, get really speed gears what you want out of Dragon with a lesser extent of lifesteal and frost depending on where you are in the game. So I'm going to jump into Dragon 24, which is where I farm just from the energy efficiency perspective. And here's the team I'm using in Dragon. This is not my normal Dragon team. I specifically built this. So the only poisoner on the team is Eurogrim. So we have Tyrell that does decrease attack and gives you a defense aura. We have Mashald, who his function really is to put fear on people as a crowd control methodology. We've got Roxanne for defense down, Sile of the Drakes for a combination of stuns and to res someone in case they die, and then Eurogrim as the poisoner. So really the idea is get through the waves as fast as you can, then you point Eurogrim at the dragon and he melts it with poisons. So I'm going to turn this off. Actually, I'll leave super raids on, and we'll get this started. And we'll run in, and I'll show you why I think that they nerfed Eurogrim, because it sort of makes sense. I'm going to drive this manual. You know, normally I'm doing automatic, and it's like a 4 or 5 minute run, which isn't crazy fast, but considering that I don't have a seer, it's who we get. So you start with Mashald. He puts up Leech and Fear, so now we can heal ourselves, and they might not take a turn. Then he attacks everyone. So we've started to get some damage on the team. Now Eurogrim's up by speed. He puts vapors on everybody. So this is 3 5% poisons for 2 turns on the entire team. So in theory, this is a third of their health bar that is gone. Then we have Roxanne that goes. We'll take 1 hit, preferably on Spirit Host, so she can't cleanse debuffs, puts her to sleep. He puts a Veil on himself that enables the next move. Sile hits everyone with stuns. We'll see who we get stuns. Tyrell puts decreased defense on everyone, which lets us hit harder. And then we cycle through just, hitting the most high threat targets or adding debuffs as necessary. Now I'm gonna cycle through this once or twice more on manual so we can see what Eurogrim would do. Now normally he hits Hyria when you're playing on auto, and here's sort of the point. We only added 1 5% poison, but we could have added up to 3. And so we'll look for other people to stun. Maybe we'll get lucky and stun her. Put the decreased turn meter on Spirit Host in order to not cleanse buffs. And we continue with the cycle of hitting everyone. And shortly, Eurogrim's A3 should come back up, which is what I want to demonstrate manually before I put it on auto and we go through the rest of the run. Alright, so his A1 is still there. Throws another couple of poisons. Maybe put a stunner decrease turn meter on their crowd control champion. Michelle hits hard. Roxanne follows up. Doesn't quite kill their debuff remover, but he puts them in range of no longer being a threat. Tyrell can hit whoever they want with their A1. And now Eurogrim's back, and we hit the A3 again. And there we go. And this is why I think Eurogrim got a nerf. We have a Void Epic who essentially can fill the debuff bars with poison for everyone. And this makes him, in my opinion, he's like at this point the number 3 Void Epic in the game. Behind Seer for her ability to enable speed dungeon farming, and behind Madame Ceres for her buff strip and debuff all in the same move. So at this point, Eurogrim is number 3 approximately in my mind for Void Epics. After the nerf, he'll be ahead of mid-pack, but he won't be like the standout he is now. And that's why I think Plarium nerfed him, especially when you go on auto and watch the rest of the run. You can see how effective he is in just burning down both waves and the bosses and letting you clear a lot of content. I'm not saying I agree with the nerf, but I understand it, and I think the nerf was a little bit harsh. I think if they made it only the A3 and kept the triplet only A1, he will probably be right in terms of a strong Void Epic, but not necessarily a overpowered one. So I'm going to let us get through the first wave, and then I'll speed up the run and get to the dragon. Because at this point, both champions are stunned, they're both poisoned, they're going to die, it's just a matter of time. And here we go, moving on to round 2. Then I'll let round 2 run on auto. It should be about a minute or so. This is, about as fast as you're going to go if you don't have Seer or an AoE max hit point champion. But this, for my account, is about as fast as I'm going to do Dragon 24. It ends up being, I don't know, a 5 or 5.5 minute run if it's fully auto. It's a little bit slower here because I paused it and ran on manual so you can see what's going on. But the idea is, again, Eurogrim, who is level 46, doesn't have fully rolled gear, has no masteries, can fill up everyone's debuff bars with poisons. And except in the case right now of Crimson Hell placing block buffs, block debuffs or block damage actually, can melt everyone very, very easily. So this takes a run which was slow but low risk and makes it now relatively fast but low risk. I would like to keep the ability, I agree, but it doesn't look like we're going to get to do that. So we'll burn through these real fast and then we'll show up when we get to the dragon. And here we go, we melted that last wave. The Crimson Helm's a bit of a difficulty because of the block damage. And you'll see here we are at the dragon. Again, Eurogrim is the only poisoner, and that's intentional. Normally I would bring an extra one just to make burning the dragon down easier. But you'll see we went through 2 rounds of A1 and got 2 5% poisons. I don't think that's a giant deal. The problem is, or the perceived problem from Plarium's part is, then I went through A3, we're stacking up more poisons, and we're going to get back to the A1 in a second, I believe. So now we've got a full debuff bar on the dragon, and it will melt essentially with no risk. I think a lot of people bring either Frozen Banshee to handle this, or sometimes Kale, but the hard part of the dragon is getting to the dragon. So at this point, the dragon is a fait accompli, and there's really little risk of losing. I would say Eurogrim is potentially even more impactful on my account on Ice Golem because of the AoE poisons. It helps decrease the health bar of the Ice Golem without triggering the revive move for his minions. So he also did a lot of work for me there. I would like it if they kept the A1 as a 3-hit, and I think that's my main message here is I understand why they nerfed Eurogrim. I am unhappy they did it because I'm in the middle of building him. But I would hope that Plarium could maybe take some community feedback and change the nerf strategy a little bit so it's not quite as drastic. Another way of achieving the same ends would be to just increase the cooldown of the A3 so you don't place poisons and continuous heals as much, rather than change the cooldown and reduce the amount of each. I just feel like where they are is a little bit heavy-handed, considering some of the other Void Epics in the game. It doesn't seem so terrible to me to have one who is good. I understand why you don't want to have another Seer, like the content breaking Void Epic, when you'd really want that to be a legendary. But I don't think Eurogrim is that terrible. He deserved a minor adjustment, not necessarily a gross nerf, but that's sort of where we got. So we'll see where it is. I would encourage everybody to use the feedback channels you have. So talk to the content creators you have relationships with, post in the official Discord or maybe the Reddit for Raid Shadow Legends, and reach out to Plarium and say, hey, we understand why you nerfed Eurogrim. Let's just not do it as much, because they have shown very little interest in having the community tell them what they think should be done, but maybe rather than saying, hey, we're not trying to fight the nerf as much, we can just let's influence it to be not as strong, maybe we will have a little bit of success there. Because I just built Eurogrim, I want him to work. I bet there's a lot of other people in the community that are the same way, and that they would like to have someone who is effective on all affinities, who is capable of placing a good amount of poisons and keeping your team alive, but at the same time shouldn't necessarily break all other content. So, let's give that a try as a community and see how it works. If you want to see more of this, if you want to see another video on the post-nerf Eurogrim, I'm happy to do that, because I'll already have him leveled and we'll see how it affects my account. So this is Ezron signing off. Drop me a subscribe or a like if you like the content, and that's a good sign for me to keep doing it. I appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a good day.